The Sandy and Toddcast is a Mind Garden media podcast in association with
Screw You, Todd
Productions. It's almost the end of Ghostober on the Sandy and Toddcast. We got one more to do for the month.
I'm pretty sad about that, Todd. You know how much I love Ghostober. But we've had some really good episodes this month, and I think we're going to try to continue Ghostober just a little bit into November. I was trying to think of something cute to say about November, but I can't.
But you can't, so you're just going to skip
tough.
it.
Yeah.
All right, Season 10, Episode 5 is on the way. Ghostober wraps up right here on the Sandy and Toddcast.
Hey guys, it's me, Sandy.
And this is Dave, better known as #Poor Dave.
We don't always call you that. Anyway, in case you didn't know, Dave and I are part of a great new show called Empire Spirits.
It's where we hunt lots of ghosts in some of the most well-known bars and restaurants in central New York, along with a great cast
Of characters.
Yep, Bill Vinci, Michelle Klossick, Ryan Vinci, Lafayette Cunningham, and Heather Elias.
You'll be able to see each episode starting this fall on Facebook and YouTube.
Just like our Facebook page, Empire Spirits CNY, to keep up to date on the latest.
But we can't leave you without thanking our sponsors because, well, without them, it just wouldn't be happening.
So a big thanks to the Stife on Varick Street in Utica, Bill Vinci and the Empire Plate, Utica Coffee Roasting Company, and the Sandy and Toddcast.
We'd also like to thank Northeastern Roofing and Construction, northeasternroofs.com, Labella Flowers, that's labellaflowers.com, and Independent Artistry by Dawn Marie, Independent Artistry by DMF.com.
And we can't forget licensed real estate person Paul F. Sacco, 315-525-1377 with Howard Hanna Real Estate Services, or Joshua A. Amodio with Priceless Inspections, Central New York's top choice home inspector since 2012, 315-525-8725.
Now, back to the show.
Broadcasting from two very different yet magical places not found on any map. Get ready to discuss the strange, weird, ghostly, crazy, spooky, and odd things that take place around us each and every day, all while having a little bit of fun. This is the Sandy and Toddcast. Welcome to the Sandy and Toddcast. She is Sandy.
He is Todd.
And we're wrapping up Ghostober this time around, kind of. I'm very disappointed in myself.
Why?
This Ghostober. I didn't do any decorating inside the house. Okay, I did do some stuff outside, but I really had less of a hand in that than I normally would inside the house. So nothing was put out inside the house this year. And I only saw one of my typical Halloween movies this year.
Wow.
And
you're
that
slacking.
was Halloween 1.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I saw. I did not see Hocus Pocus, which I usually watch a couple of times from somewhere between August and October 31st. Didn't see that at all. Didn't see Halloween 2. Didn't see The Exorcist. Didn't see Salem's Lot. Didn't see any of that stuff this time. So it's been a really just non-eventful Halloween for me overall.
You sent me a picture. Now, I know you do the inside too, which is... So by inside, though, do you mean inside on the porch?
No, like inside on the porch got done. But I like in the house, okay. I've got a lot of... for the holidays, I always think you should have a theme. So for Christmas trees are the theme in my house. So I have all different kinds of Christmas trees that, not like big ones, but little ones. And like the table runners have Christmas trees on them. And so there's a theme. For Halloween, it's always based on pretty much the pumpkin. So I have different kinds of wax pumpkins. Aww. I've got, all that. I've got some really great ravens statues that I usually put out.
Ooh,
those didn't get put out. So it was kind of a dull Halloween for me. I've been so busy with work that I really didn't have time to enjoy my favorite fucking holiday.
I know. But I will tell you this. I didn't get a picture of the porch this year inside, but I did see the outside because I think last year, the previous years, I got pictures of I got pictures of the porch. But I will tell you this. The outside of the house looks fucking amazing.
Yeah, it looks pretty good. So
it looks really good. So do you guys get a lot of trick-or-treaters?
Not a ton, but the thing about it is it's going to be cold this year. So I don't know how that's going to affect things, you know?
We're going to get, it said, there's not a big chance of a lot of rain here, but it's going to be about 45 of a high, which means that by the time the kids come around at like 6 o'clock, it'll probably be 40. But I'm telling you right now, when I was a kid, it was like 22 degrees and we were out there in our costumes. So
I just don't think kids have that, you know, and I don't think the parents have the push through to do that stuff. I think here it's going to be about 37 that day. So you probably got colder weather coming your way down the line. But I mean, come on. We just had really warm weather this previous week. Like almost to the point where it was too goddamn hot for autumn.
I know.
And then all of a sudden, you know, and then there was some forecasts saying maybe a little snow this weekend. In some parts of the state did see flurries, but nothing stuck around. But it's like, come on, really?
You know what really bothers me, though, and we won't get off on this tangent. We won't go down this rabbit hole. But when I was a kid, I remember the block that I grew up on was sort of an oval shape. So we were up towards the top of our street. And you kind of go around, it curves a little bit, and then it comes up the other side and curves. So it's kind of like an oval. And I'm telling you, my grandmother would take us around for Halloween every year around the block. We used to call it around the block. And literally hundreds of children. The whole community got into it.
Yeah.
The whole neighborhood. The parents would set up card tables at the end of their driveway with hot chocolate and coffee for the parents, donuts for the parents. You know, everybody would would say hi to each other and stand there and talk, and you'd see kids crisscrossing constantly across the street. And it was like a block party back then. I mean, it was just amazing. And actually, I know somebody who lives on the other street now, and she says that they still get a lot of kids like that every year, which I'm very happy about because you know what? If we get 15 kids now, and we live in I'm not going to say an affluent neighborhood, but we live in a pretty nice neighborhood.
Yeah.
And if we get 15 kids now, it's a lot.
Yeah.
And it's sad for me because I think that there's nothing wrong with trunk or treats. There's nothing wrong with the mall, you know, whatever. But I just think that part of being a kid is that excitement of dressing up in your costume and running around at night and just being a kid. And I think that over the years, we've sort of taken that away from these kids, that joy of being able to go house to house and, you know, and I just feel like it's a shame that they don't get to see what we saw as kids and that excitement and those plastic masks that we couldn't breathe in.
That smelled like chemicals. Yeah.
And that smelled like chemicals. You know, maybe that's not such a bad thing.
Well,
I don't know.
I think it's just our communities are less connected than they ever were. And I'm a prime example of I don't want to know my neighbors, you know. I'm good with people bringing kids by. I've got neighbors who live behind me. I don't know their names, but they got a couple of dogs. And so they'll bring the dogs around for dog treats, right? And that's great. It's nice to see them once a year, and then that's it. But, you know, I think that has a lot to do with it. We're just not as connected in our communities as we used to be.
Yeah, and I'm a very private person. Like, I know my neighbors, and if we're outside at the same time, we say, hi, how are you? But I certainly don't need my neighbors coming to my house for a cup of coffee.
Right.
Or I don't need to be going to their house for a cup of coffee. We all watch out for each other. We have a group chat on Facebook where if there's somebody suspicious in the neighborhood or we catch something on the blink, you know, our blinks or rings or whatever, we'll alert each other. And that's really plenty for me, Todd.
Right.
I don't need to be anybody's BFF in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
It's just, you know, but I get it. But still at the same time, I do wish that I think a lot of things like getting on your bike I saw a meme today, this morning about, your parents thought you were, back in the 70s and 80s, your parents thought you were just riding your bike around to your friends' houses in the neighborhood all day, where you were like riding it 5 miles away to the mall, and you were, using a Ouija board, and you were, doing all this and running around, and they never had any idea. And I know the world is a different place than it was back then, but I think that we've lost what it means to really be a kid in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So I don't know how we got off on that tangent, but yeah. So anyway, so happy Halloween, happy Samhain to anybody who celebrates. And it's an exciting time of year. It's a sad time of year because it's the end of Ghostober, but we're going to keep it going a little bit and do some other stuff with it. One thing I wanted to bring up, I know I've mentioned this before, and it's kind of food for thought, and I'd love to get your opinion and maybe everybody else's opinion on it. Dave and I have been watching the webinar series by Paranormal State's Ryan Buell. And Ryan has been investigating the paranormal for like 25 years now. It's hard to believe, but he has been. And he told us the story in the first webinar about his experiences and the haunting that sort of followed him as a child and what made him, so interested in trying to learn about it and trying to understand it. And, he went through some tough times about 10 years or so ago, but he's doing really well now. He just went back to school, and he is a therapist. He just graduated. And so he was going over some of the basics of things that he's learned over the years and his thoughts and his perspectives on it. And I love getting other investigators' perspectives, whether they're quote unquote famous or not. I love learning from other investigators because it can help shape my thought process. It makes me think a little bit. And one thing that he said that I thought was really, really interesting. We all know about residual energy versus intelligent energy, right? And Ryan uses the term ghosts versus spirits. So to Ryan, a spirit is essentially, and I'm dumbing this down for all of us because I had to think about it when he was saying it. Essentially to Ryan, a spirit is your intelligent energy. So it interacts with you. You know it's there. It knows you're there, or they know you're there. Whereas a ghost is more of your residual energy. Mm-hmm. And I don't think I've ever thought of it that way. Everybody throws all of these terms around. They're easily, thrown around for everything. Some people call it a ghost no matter what. Some people call it a spirit. Some people call it an energy. But I just thought it was an interesting take on the difference between intelligent and residual energy. So residual, a ghost, intelligent, a spirit. What do you think about that?
I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah. Never thought about it that way. We interchange those terms so often, but I've always kind of struggled to kind of be able to not label them, but you know what I mean? Like give them a name. Yeah. It's not just residual. It's an energy. It's not just an intelligent energy. But I think that's really cool. And so I just brought that up because I thought it was an interesting way to differentiate between the two. So.
When you started going down that road and you mentioned the word spirit and ghost, as soon as you said that, I knew exactly what you were going to say because it immediately popped and I said, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. And I like it. I like it a lot. So it's been very informative. We've watched 2 of the 4 so far. He did one on Friday night. This is Sunday. He did one on Friday night that he hasn't posted yet because he does them on Zoom and we can't cast them to the TV off of Zoom, so we can't both watch them at the same time.
Right.
So instead of doing it live, we wait until he releases the recordings of it. And and then we watch it together because we can cast it from there. So the last two are about demonology and his experience with the demonic. And so I can't wait to see these two because he's done a lot with the demonic. And I always respected his style because if you notice, his show was fairly groundbreaking for the time, because I actually think that Kindred Spirits kind of followed in his footsteps as far as making it the whole story and not just, can you knock once if you're here? They really took a very organic approach to the whole thing and looked at it as the whole picture when they were doing it and took emotions and feelings into account. And so I thought Paranormal State was very good and very groundbreaking when it did come out. So very interesting. If you get a chance, just check it out. Check him out, his page on Facebook, and I'm sure he'll be doing some more webinars and stuff. It was really, really interesting. So that's all I want to say about that. But I just thought it was a cool way of looking at it, and I think I'm going to start to look at it that way myself.
So yesterday was October 28th.
Yes.
One of those full moon things, right? If you're into it, it was the full hunter's moon, and there was a partial lunar eclipse, and there was supposed to be big energy last night and all that. And did you take advantage of that and do any manifesting or anything?
I didn't, because I was so tired. I actually was going to make some moon water, because they say that this is the time when moon water would be most effective, and then you can do whatever you need to do. You put your crystals with it, you leave it out overnight, and it doesn't have to be during a full moon, or it can be at any time, because the moon's energy still works with it. But right. I thought, this would be really great. You put your crystals out there with it, and they charge, and it's just really great. You can use it for manifesting and stuff. And then I fell asleep. Yeah. So that didn't happen. Yeah. But, I thought that was a neat thing. I've never tried to do moon water before, so I thought that was neat. But I'm going to try it, though. What about you? Anything cool last night, Todd?
Well, as you know, I did an investigation, which I have not done for some time. Mm-hmm. And had a little get-together last night with some former members of the Haunted State crew from way back, part of the original crew of the show and the movies and all that kind of stuff. And also my friend Lisa.
Yes.
So Jason was there, and David was there, and Lisa was there, and Jason's mother came. Her name's Sharon. Uh-huh. And it was cool. So what we did was, I want to tell you the quick story, hopefully quickly. There is an opera house in Green Lake, Wisconsin called the Thrasher Opera House, which was built in 1910 by Charlie Thrasher. And this is one of those, it's one of the stories of opera houses you hear all the time. It started off with vaudeville and plays and acts and all that kind of stuff. Then it started showing movies, and a lot of those were silent movies at the time. And the last show that came out of the theater was in 1939. And then it was a lot of other things. It was used as a sewing machine. I don't want to say a sewing machine factory, but they made clothing and stuff like that. So it was lined with sewing machines, and women would work. And so then it was a garage for a while where they stored boats. Wow. So they ripped a big hole in the side of the building so they could have a garage door and all that. And then
it hurts me.
It does. And then in the late 1980s, 1990s, they started to think about, well, we need to bring this back to what it was. And they did, and it's been doing live music and live shows since. Good. And so Jason works there. It's his gig now, and so they did an auction. This is a nonprofit venue. And so they did an auction to raise money. And this year they decided, you know what? It'd be great if we did a haunted tour or something like that. And then we'd get some ghost hunters to come in and have an experience with whoever bought the item. Well, it went really well. They made the money on it. And then the family that bought it just couldn't make the event. And so it was canceled. And so just out of the blue, I said, well, we were going to do it anyway. And obviously there's not a show there that night. Can we still do it? And the director, the manager's like, yeah, that's fine. Just blah, blah, blah. So we got to do that last night.
So cool.
And first of all, the cool thing is Jason and David and I have not investigated together since probably 2017.
Wow.
That was the last time. And I think the last time we were all together was actually when we did the Grand Opera House in Oshkosh. And we had some really cool evidence that happened that time. David Williams has been on this show before and talked about his experience at the Riverside Theater in Milwaukee. Jason's been on the show, usually just in a comedic role when we have Lisa on to give. Fun. He's great. So, but we did this, and I brought Lisa along because the last time Lisa and I ever investigated together, and the last time she's investigated at all was probably 2009, maybe 2008.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
It was really my first investigation. I had my really cheap audio recorder, and I had my, the night vision Sony camera that everybody had back in the day. And we went out to a cemetery and investigated here in Oshkosh. So, all right, we got together last night, and it was really cool seeing those guys together. Obviously, the equipment has changed since the last time we were out.
Just a little bit.
But we had a really great time. And we basically did 3 sessions. 2 sessions were done in the actual theater itself. And the first session, what we did was we all kind of sat in different areas. I went up in the balcony, but we had people in the audience, and we had instruments on stage. There was a piano in the corner. We had an instrument on there. We had a K2 over there, or EDI machine, and whatever. And when we first got there, I will tell you, and I think you would have felt this too. There was nothing. This place was empty. There was nothing going on. And as we just started, asking questions and opening things up, I could feel the anxiety rise. I get that where your heart's beating a little bit and it's almost a little hard to breathe.
Right.
And I, with this group, I can be very vocal about that because they understand that, that's part of the investigated process, unlike other groups that I've worked with. And, everybody else was having some sort of experience, whether there were cold spots or, heightened sense of, but we were having a lot of reaction and we really couldn't nail down who was there, but we were getting some of the bumps, right? Can you make a noise and then you get a bump? Can you turn that device on the stage? Boom, there it goes. Can you shut it off now? Boom, it's out, right? We haven't gone through any of the audio or the video yet that we caught, but the piano that was in the right-hand corner of I'll call it the auditorium or the theater, was not on stage, but sitting off to the side, kind of like where the piano player would be during silent movies, not on stage, right? Off to the side, usually down near the audience.
Right.
And it's not used that often, but we were getting readings over there. And we had an experience where I was in the very furthest corner away from where that piano was. So kitty corner from the piano up in the balcony.
Okay.
And we did the whole, if you're with us, can you do something with the piano? And immediately we got a reading on the EDI. And at the same time, my Mel meter, which is the one that you have that has the REM pod and all that kind of stuff, went off as well. At the exact same time. So it was interesting. And we had eventually that energy calmed down again. But we were having some interaction. I had a laser grid on the stage, and that was acting really weird where it would shut off and then it would turn back on, or it would fade way down. And then each one of us had seen if you've looked at a laser grid, I'm talking about the old school ones with the green lights and the very pin small little lights.
Yes.
If you watch them enough, sometimes you'll see one or two of them kind of explode almost like in a white light.
Yes.
When something's going on, and each one of us had a separate experience where we saw that happen on the stage. And eventually that completely died out. Fresh new batteries, and it finally just went out altogether. And it went out on a question. So anyway, we wrapped up that session. We went out, we chatted for a while. We told stories about some of the other people that we used to investigate with. It was a lot of fun. And then we did another session. And what we did on this one is we did a spirit box session on stage. David Williams and I were on stage, and then the other members were in the audience so that we could get two different vantage points.
Okay.
This is where it got really interesting because, again, we went in and it felt really dead, nothing going on. And then all of a sudden, for me, the anxiety level started going up. I started feeling the heaviness in my chest. I was breathing less smoothly. And all of a sudden we started getting hits on the different devices. But a lot of it was coming from the piano. We had an EDI over there, which measures movement. It measures EMF. It measures temperatures. It does all that kind of stuff. And during the break, Jason's mother, Sharon, told us that she had a family member, I believe it was her mother, that played for the silent movies in Fond du Lac.
Wow.
And she had mentioned while we were out, she was wondering during that session, because this is her first session ever doing anything like this.
Right.
She was wondering if maybe her mom was trying to come through.
Yeah.
So on the second session, what basically happened was most of what was going on was focused on the piano. In fact, David and I, who were on stage, which is where the spirit box was located, we continued to hear what we could only describe as piano notes coming through.
Yep.
And not the rest of the members could not hear it, but we could. And we'd hear it and we'd both look at each other immediately like, did you hear that kind of thing? So I know that we were hearing the same thing.
Right.
And we would ask questions and the EDI on the piano would go off. And at one point, Jason went over and played some music, and he doesn't play piano, but he faked it and actually faked it pretty well. And then he sat back down, and his mom and he kind of had a conversation with, I believe, Jason's grandmother.
That's amazing.
You know, Sharon said, "Mom, are you here tonight?" Blink, 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 blink. Right?
Yep.
Did you like Jason's piano playing? Nothing. Right? Does he need some practice? Blink, 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 blink. Right? Now, it was so weird because do you remember when we had the experience with my mom?
Yes.
And I remember saying that I knew she was going to come through, right? When we went to Cana Island. But there's no reason for her to. She had no connection there, blah, blah, blah. And so this was another experience where I feel like because they were there and it's a special place for Jason and the memory of her mother playing piano for silent movies was there, I believe she came through last night.
I 100% agree with you on that. We've seen it in real life. You and I have seen that with your mom. We've seen that it's possible. And if you think about it, Todd, the whole thing was a trigger object.
Yeah.
The whole experience for her mother, for Jason's grandmother, was a trigger object. And having the two of them there together,
right,
along with a piano.
And it was either this woman's birthday or today was her birthday. And Jason's birthday's today. So they were kind of connecting on that as well. But so here's like the clincher of the whole thing. Jason, now it's pitch black in this place, right? So we can't see each other. There's a string of lights in the back but they're just very dim. So I can't see their faces, but I could hear. And Jason said, you guys don't know my mom, but my mom doesn't react this way to anything. And she was crying.
Oh,
We did have one other thing interestingly happen. And you know, we had a growl.
okay.
And so we were on stage. They were down in the audience area. And to my right and their left, which would have been right in front of Sharon's area, a growl came through. And the first thing I said was, Lisa, was that your stomach? You know, because the girl has gas sometimes. And she said, no, it wasn't. I said, did anybody else hear that? And everybody heard it. So it was a disembodied growl again. But it wasn't, it was not evil. It wasn't dark. I really think somebody was trying to speak, and that's all we could hear.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I don't believe that every growl is truly a dark energy growl. They do. You told me this amazing story a few years ago about when you guys for Haunted State were investigating. I think it used to be the bank. It was the bar that used to be the bank. Which one was that?
That was Deja Vu.
Deja Vu.
Yep.
And you had like this epiphany about do whatever it is that you can do. Don't, you know, if I tell you to knock and you can't knock, do what you can do to communicate with me. And I do think that a lot of times that's what they can do. My theory on the white lady is that because it's such a very common phenomenon, is that they can't always manifest completely. So not every spirit is in a white dress.
Right.
But if that's all the energy that we don't know anything about the energy. We don't know anything about how much energy and for how long, their strength. So whatever it is that they can do is what's going to come through, right? So a growl doesn't necessarily mean that a demon itself is landing down in front of you. It just may mean that whoever there is who is trying to connect with you, that's how they can communicate with you. That's the level of energy they have.
Right. Or even in the case that I was thinking, like last night, maybe there was something said, but our interpretation made it sound like blop, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
So it was just an incredible night. And then we had
cool.
We had a third session. We went downstairs in the basement and we tried the experiment where somebody wears the headset and blah, blah, blah. We didn't have a lot of we had some answers, which were kind of interesting. We got a couple of names, but it had quieted down. And so my whole thought process is there energy there? Probably. Is it really amped up where you're going to experience stuff all the time? I don't think so.
Right.
But I think in the right circumstances, like it was last night, like you said, it was almost like a trigger object for this to actually happen.
Sure. I think it probably called her in.
Yeah. Yes.
It called her in. You've got think of it. I mean, people, one thing that I said this to Dave last night, we were watching, I think it was Haunted Ireland. We were watching, and one of them said, there's something here. And I said, grr, that's a pet peeve of mine. It's not a thing. It's a person.
Right.
There's someone here. And I think that sometimes we collectively forget that these are people. These were living, breathing human beings. And so if you pass down and your daughter and grandson are there and they're by a piano in an opera house where there were silent movies that you played piano for,
and your birthday, right? And they're thinking of you and they're telling stories of you. Why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't you come and visit them? Why wouldn't you choose? It's like with your mom. You know, your mom appreciated the fact that we were all there together. She felt like it was her time to come through. It was a beautiful place. You were at peace. You were not stressed out. You were enjoying yourself. You were at peace. You were welcoming. right?
Yep.
Your body, your emotional, physical, mental states were welcoming for something like that. Why wouldn't she come to you? And so let me ask you this, though. Have there ever been any stories about this theater or
Not really.
Nothing?
Nothing.
That's pretty amazing.
Jason,
So,
Jason said, he's worked there a couple of years. He's never really had anything go on. He goes, I've been aware, but the only thing they've really ever had happen there, and it's kind of funny, the paper towel dispenser in the bathroom, well, they'll walk in and there'll be like 50 feet of it shot out on the floor, And I'm like, it's just the battery or something like that. But that's all they...
Well, that's so funny because it was probably about 3 years ago. It was November 11th, I think, in 2020. We did an investigation at the restaurant in Baldwinsville, and I was in the ladies' room by. This is so funny. And this was one of the absolute most active investigations I have ever been on. But it was the beginning of the night, and I said, before we start, I have to go to the bathroom. So I get in the bathroom, and I'm in the stall, and all of a sudden, I swear to God, it sounds like the electric paper thing is working. How you put your hand under it, and you hear that mechanical sound?
Yeah.
And I'm like, there's nobody in here with me. What's going on? And I get out there, and there's no paper. But it just sounded like that. And I'm like, is there something wrong? So that just was kind of funny. But who knows? They may be messing with stuff. Who knows? But I think it's an interesting case of maybe the location itself. I mean, everything has residual energy. It doesn't mean you're going to always experience residual energy. It's
right.
Just you and I have residual energy where we work all the time because we're there all the time. But it's an interesting case for intelligent energy or spirits coming in because we ask them to, or because they feel comfortable coming into that place because there's some sort of trigger, some sort of welcoming sign, beckoning of them to come in, whether it's conscious or our subconscious is doing it, whether just talking about her mother, was the trigger, who knows? But I think that's a really interesting case.
I also have to say that one of the neatest parts of the night was, a lot of groups have like the tech manager and they're in charge of all the tech and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
David was always our tech guy with Haunted State. But last night we had a snacks manager, and so Jason shows up. He's got bags of chips. He's got cheese. He's got sausage. He's got crackers.
He's got cheese and sausage and crackers
and carrots and peppers. Green peppers that are sliced up with dip. And he's got a brownie tray. And he's got all this freaking
Why
food.
don't I get to go on an investigation with Jason?
Right, exactly.
What?
We got a snacks manager in our team, so it was a really great night.
That's amazing. I'm so glad you had a good time. I was thinking about you all night last night, and I was like, you haven't done one in so long, and I feel almost like when I talk to you about the ones that I'm doing, because I do, quite a few, and I almost always feel like I feel so bad for Todd because Todd doesn't get a chance to do many investigations. And if we lived closer, we'd be doing them all the time.
Yeah.
And so I was so happy that you got to do one. And I think that more so than somebody knocking on a wall that you don't know anything about, I think the beauty of what you guys experienced last night is an experience really for a lifetime. You got to see and witness something really beautiful happening.
Yeah.
Like you witnessed. I mean, I think about our conversation with your mom all the time.
Yeah.
Like I literally do, because it's a life-changing thought process. It's a life-changing experience to know that she consciously came back when she was ready to come back and wanted to come back to connect with you and say, hey, I'm okay. Here I am.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that she loved you enough to come back.
Right.
So I think it's wonderful. So I would consider that, regardless of any evidence that comes forth, which you still got to go through all the evidence. I would call that quite a successful evening. Just think, Jay and his mom are going to have that experience for the rest of their lives.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's amazing. And isn't that really what it's about? Learning and experiencing and helping in some way.
Yep.
So I think that's really cool. Oh, what a great story.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And there were snacks. Right. I mean, there was snacks. There was a full bar. Jason's like, if you want to pour yourself something, go ahead. There's Spotted Cow. There's soda. There's a full bar.
Well, I have to say, I will say this. I will give our apps group huge kudos, because the last major investigation we did back in March, we set up base camp in the old theater of this sanatorium and the old rec space of the sanatorium. And it was filled to the brim with food. People were bringing crock pots and people were bringing, Dave and I drove up from our home 3 hours away, and we brought, because everybody loves tomato pie. And if you're not from New York, you probably don't know what tomato pie, Northern New York or Central New York. Tomato pie is basically cooked dough. It's not really pizza. Dave hates it because it's not really pizza. And it's got tomato sauce on it with some Parmesan cheese, and it's served cold. So it's really gooey tomato paste with most of the time gooey dough and some cheese, and it's tomato pie. And everybody wanted some because they don't come down very often. So we brought that up, and it was a feast. So I think personally, ghost hunting is just as much about the feast as it is about the ghost hunting.
Okay.
Because we were all pretty stuffed by the time we were done those nights. And it was 4 nights worth of, we did 4 nights. Dave and I only did 2, but we did 4 nights worth of food.
Right.
So it was pretty amazing. So, if you get into ghost hunting, remember, you got to bring the food. Just saying.
You're right.
Bring the food.
You're right.
So snacks manager. That's awesome. That is awesome. So, all right, let's talk a little bit about Ouija boards.
All right.
And I did put up a question in our Stay Weirdos group. I'm looking it up right now because, of course, I'm not as prepared as I thought I was, about Ouija boards. And I wanted to know kind of what everybody thought about Ouija boards before. And first, let's go over a little bit over the history of the Ouija board. And then let's talk about a couple of the theories of the Ouija board and some of the responses from our gang in Stay Weirdos to see what they think about the Ouija board. And then we'll talk about us. So the Ouija board is also known as a spirit board, a talking board, a witch board. It's a flat board marked with the letters of the Latin alphabet, the numbers 0 through 9, the words yes, no, and sometimes hello and goodbye, along with various symbols and graphics. It uses a planchette or a small heart-shaped piece of wood or plastic as a movable indicator to spell out messages during a seance, because essentially that's what you're doing, a seance. Participants, which I have a thought on that too, we'll get to that. Participants place their fingers on the planchette and it's moved about the board to spell out words. It's considered to be a form of divination, which is the practice of seeking knowledge of the future or the unknown by supernatural means. Important to talk a little bit about spiritualism. Spiritualism itself was developed and reached its peak growth in membership from the 1840s to the 1920s. This is the beginning of the movement of people considering the idea that there are spirits and ghosts and something more after we die. And by 1897, spiritualism was said to have more than 8 million followers in the United States and Europe, mostly drawn from the middle and upper classes, which always makes me think of parlor games.
Yep.
Because essentially, spiritualism was parlor games. The middle class and upper class looked at it as a form of entertainment. And we've all seen stories and pictures of these so-called mediums who are hired to come to a party and, channel, and ectoplasm is coming out of their mouth and, all that kind of stuff. One of my favorites was one medium was put into a box with a curtain in front of it and was answering questions from there. And then all of a sudden they open the thing and take a picture and the ectoplasm is coming out of her mouth. I certainly hope that ectoplasm never comes out of my mouth as a medium. I'm just saying, because I don't think it would taste very good. And it probably doesn't look too flattering.
Right.
So the definition of spiritualism, it's a system of belief or a religious practice based on the theory of communication with the spirits of the dead, especially through mediums. Talking boards have been around much longer than the actual Ouija board. The name Ouija or Ouija, I grew up with Ouija, so it was hard for me to always call it Ouija. I think the correct pronunciation is supposed to be Ouija. The name Ouija is a trademark of Hasbro, but it's often used today generically to refer to any talking board. Doesn't matter where it came from. The board game version came into existence around the 1890s, beginning of the 1900s. So there's some theories about the Ouija board. Now, we know that it's most likely some sort of tool that allows us to actually speak with the dead. Those are the people who actually, believe in the fact that it is some kind of tool to communicate with the dead. Now, this is interesting, Todd. The scientific explanation is that the Ouija board phenomena is considered by the scientific community to be the result of the ideomotor response. Various studies have been conducted recreating the effects of the Ouija board in the lab and showing that under laboratory conditions, the subjects were moving the planchette involuntarily. A 2012 study found that when answering yes or no questions, Ouija use was significantly more accurate than guesswork, suggesting that it might draw on the unconscious mind. Skeptics have described Ouija board users as operators. Some critics have noted that the messages ostensibly spelled out by spirits were similar to whatever was going through the minds of the subjects. There's also a religious response. According to a professor of neurology named Terence Hines in his book Pseudoscience and the Paranormal, the unconscious muscle movements, not the religious response. The unconscious muscle movements responsible for the moving tables and Ouija board phenomena seen at seances are examples of a class of phenomena due to what psychologists call a dissociative state. A dissociative state is one in which consciousness is somehow divided or cut off from some aspects of the individual's normal cognitive, motor, or sensory functions. So essentially, they're saying that we're subconsciously making our muscles jerk to move it to where our mind literally wants it to move to.
Right.
So if we're having a Ouija board session and, I ask if Joe Schmo likes me in a romantic way, if I like Joe Schmo, my subconscious mind is going to make my hands, my muscles, move it towards yes. That's the whole idea. And in the religious response, since early in the Ouija board's history, it has been criticized by several Christian denominations. The Catholic Church in the Catechism of the Catholic Church explicitly forbids any practice of divination, which includes the usage of Ouija boards. Catholic Answers, a Roman Catholic Christian apologetics organization, claims that the Ouija board is far from harmless as it is a form of divination, seeking information from supernatural forces. Ouija board's been used in popular culture numerous times, numerous movies, but I think one of the biggest ones, the most well-known, is that a Ouija board is an early part of the plot of The Exorcist from 1973. Using a Ouija board, the young girl Reagan makes what first appears to be harmless contact with an entity named Captain Howdy. She later becomes possessed by a demon. There was did you ever see this movie, the 1986 film Witchboard, and its sequel center on the use of Ouija?
I think I remember Witchboard.
Yeah, didn't it have that girl, and I don't even know what her name is, but I can picture her face. It had a girl that was in quite a few different movies like that back then. The 1991 film, And You Thought Your Parents Were Weird, features use of a Ouija board in an important early scene. The movie What Lies Beneath which I saw and I thought was an excellent movie. Includes a seance scene with a board. Paranormal Activity from 2007 involves a violent entity haunting a couple that becomes more powerful when the Ouija board is used, which, by the way, I thought that the first two Paranormal Activity movies were excellent. And after that, they dropped off considerably.
Yep.
Just saying.
Yep.
So lots and lots of use. It's been in books and magazines and stories and handed down from generation to generation. I did ask in our group what everybody thought, and I'm just going to read off a few of them. Our good friend Sudi, who we absolutely adore, she weighed in. She said, I avoid them. I know a lot of practitioners say they're just a tool, but I've had negative experiences with them. Betsy says, as young teenagers, we used to use them, but as an adult, I stay away. Lisa says, I won't touch. Now, Lisa is also a medium and an animal communicator. I won't touch them. Stay right away. I think a lot of people with sensitivities feel the same way.
Right.
Because I think that we feel things a little deeper and we have a little bit more of an approach, a spiritual approach to them. This was a great answer. Katie says, I think it's a matter of what energy and intention we are emitting while using it. And just like we teach our kids, if you mess it up, clean it up. If you drop it, pick it up. If you open it, close it. I thought that was interesting because I'll tell a little story in a minute about my experience 30 plus years ago and why I haven't picked up a Ouija board in 30 plus years. Dave Wheeler says, I don't like them or trust them. Christina, our good friend Christina, says it's a tool like any other tool. Set your energy space for the highest good. So she's basically saying almost the same thing as Katie. It's what your intentions are. My friend Lori, who is a witch, and she is, she's fantastic. She says, I love them, ! Renee says, love and fear, LOL. Used one a lot as a teenage girl with my friends. Had a great time with some nightmares mixed in. Used one once as an adult and it scared the shiznit out of me. Still think they are cool, though. Deej says, not allowed in my home. And Ann Fisher just says, no. So those were some great responses. I did have an experience with a Ouija board. This would have been in 1990. Yeah, I think 1990. Either 89 or 90. I was a freshman or sophomore in college. And I was going home for the weekend, which I normally lived with my grandparents, but I was going home to my parents' home to spend the weekend. And I had a Ouija board. My sister had a Ouija board. And she was younger, and we decided to play around with it one night, and we actually had it moving. And it was interesting because it was only moving for us. If I tried to do it with somebody else, it wouldn't work as well. And I thought that was interesting. And long story short, we'd ask this quote unquote spirit that came through, Bob, if he would do things in the house. And I mean, we're talking about people, I'm like 19 years old at the time, 20 years old. I have no idea what I'm getting myself into. It's a parlor game. It's a trick. It's fun. Asking him to knock something over in the bathroom. And then we get up and we go in the bathroom and something was knocked over. Move the shower curtain. We come back in the bathroom. The shower curtain is moved to the other side of the rod. It was just a fun trick. So we just are done for the night. So about a few days later, I'm at school and I knew this girl named Leslie who we would eat lunch together every day. I was a communications major and she was a science major. And so I hung over in the science area a lot. And we were sitting there one day at a table and I was telling her what happened and she got this stricken look on her face. She was very much into the occult. She got a stricken look on her face and she said, did you close the board? And I said, no.
What did she mean by closing the board? Like physically or? You know how you fold it in half, or
she meant, did you
say goodbye?
Say goodbye. Did you put up the wall, so to speak?
Yep.
The spiritual wall. I said no, and then we got interrupted, so we didn't finish the conversation. So I go home. I go back to my grandparents that night, and we had just started the semester. It was the end of August, so it was a very warm night. And I was laying in bed, and in the middle of the night, I heard this very loud pop. And I thought I was, dreaming. I was half asleep. I got up the next morning, and we had a big picture window in our living room. And it was very interesting because there was a large crack in the window, starting on the left bottom corner, diagonally up to the top right corner. And, well, you might say, and this was in the middle of the night. So you might say, well, a bird flew into it, or somebody threw something at it. Well, the only problem with that is when a ball or something, an object hits it, it's going to shatter. It's not going to just be one long crack. If a bird hits a window and it breaks the window, it's going to be sort of like a shattered. It's going to come out from the epicenter and work its way out. It's
like
not
a web.
Going to be just right. It's not going to be one long crack. And it was a very warm night. It wasn't cold weather. It wasn't anything like that. It was a very warm night. So I felt a little off about it. And then I noticed that something had moved. Not in front of my eyes, but something that I had left in one part of the house was suddenly in the other part of the house. And there was nobody who could have moved it. So I went into school. I went into class. And Leslie and I got back together for lunch, and I told her what happened, and she said, "Oh, Sandy, you should have closed that board." And so I said, "Well, what can I do now?" And she said, "Doesn't seem like it's anything horrendous, but what you need to do." And this is where we were talking about Stephanie a few weeks ago. In her home, this is where I started to learn about this. She said, "I want you to get salt, and I want you to put it through all the corners of the rooms of the house. And I want you to stand in the middle of the house, and I want you to, with an authoritative voice, I want you to say, 'You are not welcome here. You need to leave this space. You are not welcome here,' and say a prayer." Because at the time I was still, Catholic, and I'll always be Catholic, I guess, but I'm just not a big church believer. But I'm very much more spiritual these days. And this is one of the reasons why I started to go towards the spiritual. And she said, "And I want you to do that the next day too." And so I did it. And I mustered up all my courage because I was like, what the heck is going on here?
Right.
And I never had another problem again. I essentially banished whatever was there. But what it did do was it scared me enough to realize that whatever you're doing with this board has the potential of bringing harm. Now, is it that we're involuntarily moving things? It's possible because, I use my pendant a lot, my pendulum. It's the same kind of idea.
I was going to bring that up, yeah.
It's divination. I set my intent, though, that it's for good. But I always feel when I'm using the pendulum like it's coming from somewhere else. I don't feel, and nothing bad, but I'm of course, I'm much more careful now. I'm much more educated on what's going on. So maybe it is the fact that you're doing involuntary movements. But again, I say, but who's to say that those involuntary movements aren't coming from another source?
Right.
You know, we can twist this around. Personally, I have not gone near or touched one. I'm 52 in 32 years. I will not touch them. I will never touch a Ouija board again. I just don't feel comfortable. That's my experience. That's me as a medium. Now I look back on that and I wonder if the fact that I'm a medium actually encouraged what happened in some way, because I was a little more open to these things happening. And I guess my thought process on a Ouija board is, if you're going to use it, and again, it is a tool. I agree. It is a tool. It's not a game. It was made as a game, but it's not a game. I could write something on a piece of paper that looks like a Ouija board, and I could use that too. It's a tool. But you're opening yourself up. So if you're going to do these things, if you're going to play this game, my suggestion, and I say game not in the true sense of the word, if you're going to play the game of the Ouija board, then you really should know what you're getting yourself into. You should be prepared. You should set your good energy and good intentions ahead of time. And you should make sure that you say the prayer to St. Michael. You say whatever it is you have to do to close that board spiritually when you're done with it. I don't recommend them. I know that people love them. I know that they're fun. But I will just say there's nothing like the fear that I felt when I walked into the living room that morning and saw that crack in the window for no apparent reason, and the look on Leslie's face when I told her what happened. So that's just my take on it. If you're going to use it with extreme caution. I'm not saying never use it. I'm just saying I personally would not use it. I don't feel comfortable with it, especially with the stage that I am now. I've been kind of, leveling up quite a bit over the last few years in my abilities, and I just don't feel comfortable. I know too much, I think, at this point of what could happen. They are like a seance. I've done a couple seances in my life. The first one was something just off the charts, and you're essentially doing a mini seance with a Ouija board. So, what are your thoughts?
I'm not a big fan of them. Not because of them themselves, but because of the fact that people do look at them as a game, as a trickery kind of thing, something to do to have a little bit of fun, right? Mm-hmm. It's like pulling out Monopoly and playing Monopoly for some people. So that's really my concern about it. Like, so we did an investigation last night. Mm-hmm. You could almost say it's kind of the same thing, right? We have all this equipment out. We're asking energies and spirits or ghosts or whatever you want to say to let us know that they're there, make this go off, try that, knock if you blah, blah, blah. It's not that different. But again, you have to close that too at the end of the night. You have to say, okay, that's it. Thanks a lot. Leave me alone. You're not allowed to follow me. I'm ending this conversation now. So whether it's a Ouija board or it's a pendulum or it's going out and investigating and you're communicating that way, you end when you hang up the phone. What do? You say goodbye and you cut the connection, right?
Yep.
And if it's worse than that, if it's a bad situation where it's somebody and you're no longer friends and whatever, what do? You can block them, right?
Right.
Same kind of thing. Hang up the phone when you're done.
I think
the problem with Ouija board again is people think it's a game. They don't really put much credence to some of it, and so at the end of it, they just kind of throw it to the side, throw it in the box, and that's it.
Or they believe in it too much.
Yeah.
They depend on it. And when you depend on it, your defenses come down. When I don't depend on the pendulum. I use the pendulum as a tool. in looking at an entire situation. I don't depend on it. It can become, I'm not being funny, almost an addiction when you're somebody whose heart is hurting, your head is hurting, your life is hurting, and you depend on this for some sort of answer and communication. Just
like going to see a psychic or a card reader, all that kind of stuff.
I agree.
People sometimes depend too much on that as well.
And that's one of the reasons I won't read people, is because I don't want that responsibility on me for things that can happen when people depend too much on this stuff. I've seen it happen. So and every investigation that we do, what do? We close it. Yep. We say the prayer. We say an opening prayer and a closing prayer. And we tell whatever spirits we've dealt with to stay where they are. They're not allowed to follow us. You have to do the same thing with the Ouija board. I think if you want to use it, go for it. But again, I think be knowledgeable, educated on it, common sense, take it seriously, and understand what you're actually potentially getting yourself into with a Ouija board.
If you want to know the dangers that can happen, whether you're investigating or you're playing with a Ouija board or whatever, go back and find our episode with David Williams, who is one of the gentlemen that I investigated with last night.
Yes.
He has not investigated since his experience at the Riverside Theater in Milwaukee. And if you want to know why we warn you about Ouija boards and we warn you about investigating and we warn you about all that stuff, listen to that episode and you'll find out why we feel that way.
I'll go hunt that up and I'll put that in the show notes for everybody.
Excellent.
So that you guys can check it out. Because I think it's just really important that we all understand, all of us, we understand what our decisions in the paranormal world and the spiritual world can sometimes lead to if we're not careful.
I'm going to throw this out there. Last night when I saw Dave, again, I've not seen him for a number of years.
Right.
He handed me a thumb drive. And he said, all of the evidence from that night is on this thumb drive. Everything that he captured, everything that he found is on this thumb drive. So now I have it. And I think I need to go through it.
Yeah.
And I think it might make for a good episode for our podcast. And maybe even David would come back on. And
I would love it if he would come back on. He's such a nice guy.
Yeah, he's great.
And I
let him hug me last night.
Yeah. Oh my God. See? Now he's amazing. I
was giving out hugs left and right. I think the only person I didn't hug last night was Lisa. I did hug Lisa, but Jason's mom got a couple of hugs. Jason got a couple of hugs. David got a couple of hugs.
I'm not going to go so far as to say you're a changed man.
I'm not. But I am not.
I'll never forget the first time we met and I wasn't going to hug you and you hugged me and I was so taken by surprise. I didn't know how to react.
It was peer pressure. I felt like I had to.
I'm sure. So, but what a great episode. Lots of fun stuff in this Ghostober wrap up. And we're going to continue it a little bit more. I think we'll talk more ghosty stuff. But again, Ouija boards, I don't know. But I will never use one again. I was 20 years old. No, I was 20 years old. I'm, 32 years later, I still am adamant I will not use one. So,
well, let's grab our spiel real quick.
You can find the Sandy and Toddcast on any of the platforms that you normally find your podcasts, including YouTube and Twitter. Be sure to like the Sandy and Toddcast on Facebook to keep up on the latest goings-on, including each week's episode. You can also join our group, Stay Weirdos Friends of the Sandy and Toddcast, for more fun. Stay Weirdos is a safe place to share your thoughts, feelings, ideas, and random inappropriate memes without judgment. Sandy and Todd also have a podcast called the Empathecary Podcast. It's for empaths, by empaths. And if you know an empath, you might want to listen too. Find and like the page on Facebook. And finally, if you're thinking about starting your own podcast and just aren't sure where to start, Sandy and Todd can also help with that too. Mind Garden Media is their latest project where the dynamic duo can guide you every step of the way in your podcasting journey. Editing, producing and consulting is what they do. Like Mind Garden Media on Facebook or email them at themindgardenmedia@gmail.com. And as always, thanks for staying weird.
So while Ghostober is, basically officially over, this is the final one.
Right.
I do want to mention something, though. Today, on this date in history, a birthday, a very special little birthday. Born on this date, Bob Ross.
Bob Ross. Amazing.
Yeah.
Bob Ross and his pretty little trees.
That's right.
I know you're such a huge... I think I've even sent you some Bob Ross stuff over the years.
Are you kidding me? I've got the poster on the wall over here. I've got the can of Bob Ross energy drink back there. There's a Bob Ross mug someplace.
Well, I thought that the poster was great. He's the Bob father.
Yeah, there he is right there.
And it's funny because I use it all the time. I got Dave a T-shirt that says the dog father.
Nice.
And so I will use that a lot. So, never know what you're going to get from me.
All right. Well, I guess until next week. Bye.
Bye.